Good morning and welcome to Grace. This morning we'll paraphrase Mark chapter 15. We'll find a principle to put into practice. Mark 15 starts out with the chief priest delivering Jesus over to Pontius Pilate for a trial. And Pilate asked him right off the bat, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Because apparently it was insurrection and claimed to being a king over the emperor, which was the problem. And Jesus makes no answer, and of course, Pilate is amazed. Now, as Pilate asks him questions and can't figure it, he's starting to feel like there's nothing wrong with this. And he kind of sees that the chief priests have put him up to it. So he's going to try and find a way to get out of this. And then he goes to the crowd and says, "Hey, do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" And everyone's like, "No, we want Barabbas." Barabbas was an insurrectionist. Barabbas, by the way, means bar in Hebrew, means son. Abba means father. So you've got the son of the father, or Jesus, who is the actual son of the father. So do you want me to release you king of the Jews or Barabbas? And they say, "Barabbas." "What do you want me to do with the king of the Jews?" "Crucify him." And he's sort of shocked. But Pilate's wishing to satisfy the crowd, he releases for them Barabbas, and they sort of move on. And he has Jesus scourged and then sent to be crucified. Now the soldiers then start mocking Jesus, and they kind of do like fake salutes, "Hail, King of the Jews," and paying homage to him, and they just think it's hilarious. Then they head up to Golgotha or Calvary, and that's where they compel a passerby, Simon Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Why is that even important? Well, Alexander and Rufus must have been known to the readers of the Gospel of Mark, and that becomes important because then it shows you it's written within 30 years of Jesus' life, because you got an eyewitness who was actually there, and you've got he's writing to people who would have known who Alexander and Rufus were. Okay, then they put him on Golgotha. They put him up on the cross. He is mocked. And on the sign here it is, the King of the Jews. And then they go, "Hey, let's see if he saved others, see if he can save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe." And those who were crucified with him also reviled him. So then you got the 6th hour had come, and then there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. All right, so Jesus is crucified from 9 to 12 in the light, and then 12 to 3, or 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and then 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. The first 3 hours are in light, and that sort of represents how Jesus was judged by men. All right. Then the next 3 hours, Jesus is the cross is all dark, and all of Israel is dark, to represent how Jesus is judged at the hands of God. Another interesting thing is the 9th plague. Out of the 10th plague out of Egypt, the 9th plague was darkness, and the 10th plague was what? The death of the firstborn son. Bam. So here you have Jesus, who is the firstborn son, and who is also the lamb that was slain, that takes away the sin of the world. Going back to that piece. So then, what's really important here is verse 34. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In other words, here it is. That's when he's experienced the judgment of God. He's experiencing hell for us. He's forsaken that we might be accepted. And then eventually he cries out, and then he breathes his last. And then that's when you have the centurion say, "Truly this man was the Son of God." Then you got all the women there watching, and then they go to see where he's going to be buried. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, respected member of the council, was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage, this is a big deal, and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised that he should have already died, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And then he turns the body over, and then you notice that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, also saw where he was laid. So Joseph of Arimathea cuts out a huge rock, rather it's already been done. It was his tomb, and has Jesus buried there. Now, here's what the principle after all that summary is this, is that people acknowledge and obey the king, or they reject him so that they can be their own king. People either obey or acknowledge and obey the king, or they reject him so they can be their own king. Which is true, right? Either I want to be king because I want to do things my way. And this comes back to just, listen, and I love democracy and I'm all for it and it's the best form of government. I love it. But there's this reality that we feel almost like when we can't vote somebody out of office, there's sort of a frustration, or if they're that's weird, right? I only want someone to be in charge if I let them be in charge. And the reality is Jesus is in charge whether you want him or not. It's just that if you do, then your life is going to be way better and you have an afterlife with Jesus for forever. And so that ultimately becomes a pretty big incentive. So now, the practice then is, Lord, help me to see where I reject you and I seek to be my own king. So let's pray. God, in Mark 15, we watched so many times the people reject you. God, we watched over and over people finding ways to put you to death, to mock you, Lord, and it was an crying shame. It was man's worst evil, but it was your greatest good and greatest sense of mercy. We thank you for that, God. We love you for that. And so, God, I pray that when I have opportunities to accept you, accept your rule, and obey you in my life, God, I pray I would not reject you. I pray that for everyone watching, that they too would follow hard after you. We love you, Lord Jesus. Amen.